My name is Engineer Mouse. It's really good to be with you once more. I believe I can see my screen. Okay. If that is so, I would like you to just watch this talking about maintenance work planning. All right. In the next 4 to 5 minutes, we just use that to go through this video briefly. Please take note of every point illustrated here. Okay. I want to believe you can all hear me clearly. So, the video you just watched, some few minutes, is all about excuse me, maintenance planning. Maintenance planning. In our previous class, I remember I started we started delving into um, the area of maintenance, as it were, okay, under facility management. And it's important that we note that these um, areas must be considered when you're looking at. Oh, okay, I think you can see my screen now. Good. It's important that we note these areas that must be considered when we are treating facility maintenance. Okay. Um, Now we also have we had also talked about the storage aspect because we said for this curriculum, an area that we'll be looking at in terms of facility maintenance is majorly the aspect of storage, as it were, okay, or as it concerns this course. The aspect of storage, very important. And in the last class, we started talking about the the we talked about some things on storage, but we were on uh, we talked about some activities like cleaning of the tank, degassing, and also talked about we started talking about the types of storage tanks and the rules or regulation guiding the installation of storage tanks. Okay, to well, we also have to consider the environment to be sure that and consider the underground water also to be sure there is no contamination of underground water. Very important that we I will put these into consideration. Okay, and then we said tanks should have secondary containment system that will help retain any leaks. Now, those double walled vacuum monitored tanks have a vacuum between the two walls. Yeah. Then, apart from that, we also have what we call the bond wall that is usually installed or erected around these tanks too. Okay. Then we have some other forms of installations on these tanks, you understand, during maintenance, or I'm sorry, during construction rather. And these installations like pressure gauges, especially in terms of gauges now, we have the pressure gauges, we have the temperature gauges, we have the level gauges too that helps to determine the level at which the fluid or the content inside is. I remember we also talked about some incidences that could occur with such tanks if you have leakages or ruptures, and also talked about boiling liquid and evaporating vapor explosion, bleed and sleeve and the rest of them. All right. Um, so going on to the looking at the safety hazards. Okay, one of your assignments that um, should I bring that now? Okay, I'll bring that later. I'll bring that later. I'll bring that later. Uh, an addition to your assignments. Looking at our safety hazards for liquefied petroleum gas and liquefied natural gas. Okay, we need to be very careful when we are dealing with all these hydrocarbons. We have already mentioned earlier that these gases are usually put in for gases. We always put them in high pressured um, vessels or bottles, uh, thick high pressure vessels. Now that's because we first have to confine them to a little volume. Why? Because of the random nature of the molecules of the gases. So the kind of storage that is used for gases now is such that it will have to be under very high pressure. All right. Yeah. So we have them in high pressures in cylinders or in bottles and the rest of them, or some spherical tanks. Okay. Now the hazards applicable to all liquefied hydrocarbon gas or gases are associated with one of them is what flammability. They are highly flammable, and the slightest leakage of any of these gas you and slightest of it, you could have an explosion once there's a naked flame or a little flame around, anywhere around. Even a spark can lead to that. So when we are operating in areas where we have such storage facilities, we avoid using if I go, we avoid using um, metallic instruments or implements that will also come in contact with metals. So if, for instance, you have to hit any metallic object or structure or something around there, we try as much as possible to avoid using a, a like metal. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. When two metals strike themselves, you could have what now? A spark. All right. So because of that spark and being within such an environment, you could have an explosion. All right. So we have flammability, we have chemical reactivity. Yes, they are chemicals, they are reactable, they could react with some, they have a high level of reactivity. You understand? And even with humans too, yes, they could have reactions on you. There was a case in 2015 December where some wonderfully skilled, experienced hands, they call them fitters. They were on a project. It was a 5-day project, clamping in one of the IOC's location somewhere in River State, Bonny. And on their last day, the fifth day, where they were supposed to be rounding off that project, what happened? They had they had gone on break and came back. That clamping is more like um, is an activity for like you are holding down or properly positioning or installing excuse me installing pipes. You know, and in such cases, there is what we call isolation. You isolate some existing lines so that you can carry out your activities on the normal line that you are on. Okay, so by isolating, you just lock the valve that connects leads fluid to the area that you are working, and once that valve is set on lock, it means that there will be no flow and all that. Sometimes you could use a flange to cover that side of the pipe. Any form will help in isolating such region of flow. Now, why am I saying this? These guys went on break, they came back and they had isolated a portion, but because of some little faults or so on some little faults in the way they had still kind of done the isolation, we still had some gases escaping. The minutest, what I'm saying this is that the minutest crevice or avenue for the gases to escape, they will follow it to come out. And they had migrated into another region that was to be opened by these guys. This is a true life story I'm telling us. And what happened was, while they were carrying out, as they came back from break to continue their work, they, because of complacency, some level of complacency, they ignored carrying out a gas testing operation to test whether there was any gas around or maybe leakage of gas around the area before they start. Right now, these gases, most of them are usually odorless, especially when it's from source. It's when they are processed that there's what we call gas odorization, the process of making the gas have a smell so that it can be detected by smell. But naturally, they are most of them are odorless, especially methane and the rest. They are odorless gases, but very poisonous. Now, what happened? As they started to work, they opened that source, and that was how the gases that had accumulated, migrated and accumulated in that region that was opened, they inhaled it within seconds, in less than a minute. 4 of them had slumped and died. Yes, December 2015. Four experienced hands, very experienced hands with families and all, smoked and died in that location. That location was shot. They tried to cover the whole story and everything or incident to an extent, but that whatever compensation they might do for the family will not bring back the lives of those individuals. All right, so it is we have hazards associated with the storage of this. So if you remember while we're talking about the maintenance, the video you were watching mentioned something among the elements, talked about people, place, time, the tools and equipment and materials, and then information. All right. Most importantly, the first thing you must always consider in maintenance is people. You have to also be sure of their safety, especially with the hazards associated with the major material that you handle in the operations, which is the crude oil and gas. All right. So part of we said flammability, chemical reactivity, temperature and pressure. And most of the serious health hazards in liquefied hydrocarbon gases. You know, we use LHG to classify both LNG and LPG. All right. LNG is liquefied natural gas, which is methane compressed in liquefied form. LPG is propane and butane. An example is what you have in your cooking gas. You understand? And those ones are stored in bottles. Then we have, uh, but when we are calling them together, we refer to them as LHG, which is liquefied hydrocarbon gases. All right. So now the most serious hazards with um, these gases is unplanned release from containers or canisters. Now, another thing that can also happen is when there's an unplanned release. For instance, you store imagine you storing a cylinder of gas. I don't know if you've seen this sometime last year or early this year. There was this video that went viral of a cooking gas cylinder that exploded in a car. The person had filled the gas up and he kept it in his car. Now the car was parked under the sun. Typically, by locking everywhere in the car, there's already heat inside. Then the sun also hitting again. That's like double tragedy. And within a few minutes or a few moments, what happened? There was a thunderous explosion. The gas cylinder exploded. The gas exploded in the car, destroyed the car, destroyed some facilities or some structures around. That was a massive explosion. All right. Now, it can really be very terrible. Remember, I said that these gases are already stored under very high temperature. So, if there is an unplanned release of um, the canisters or whatever, if there's an unplanned release, and there's first the movement, the explosion around can be massive. And if there's now an ignition source in the process, you have an outbreak of fire. All right. Release can occur by failure of the container or valves for a variety of reasons. Now, the containing vessel, if not properly maintained, it can cause release for a variety of reasons. I've told us of an incident somewhere in a facility in Akwa Ibom in 2013. Yes, December 2013, December 11, 2013, if I remember precisely. And what happened was it was just rainfall. Now it's a storage area, a process, a tank farm, and they have one of the tanks called a condensate tank. The condensate tank is not usually what contents. They are more of waste, sludges, and condensate that is taken off from crude. You know, contains water, sludge, debris, and the rest of them. So it's usually sent into a tank for temporary storage and treatment or for a while before they can look for ways to dispose them. All right. So, but mind you, There's already crude oil, lots of crude oil mixed up with whatever is there. You understand? So they are all still very flammable. What happened? These tanks are very high tanks. The thunder arrestor of some of the tanks was faulty, but not maintained. A, not serviced, not repaired. It was not serviced, it was not repaired. They had overlooked it for a while and allowed it to stay. And just one night there was rainfall. And what happened? There was thunderstorm and one of those tanks was struck by the lightning. From there it started burning. This tank burned. Imagine those big tanks burning for 14 good days. That's massive. That's massive. That's massive. The tank, all they could do was to maintain external cooling, you know, but that could have been prevented. A lot of losses, a lot of work that was affected by that process also. All right. So the um the liquid phase of LPG has a high coefficient of expansion, with the liquid propane expanding like 16 times and liquid butane about 11 times. So you can imagine the coefficient of expansion. That's their expansion coefficient. Is the ability to expand. You can expand as much as 3 times, 16 times, or 11 times. So when they are confined in a place and they are heated up, temperature generally helps to increase temperature and the kinetic energy. In fact, once you heat up any vessel like that containing gases or hydrocarbons, what happens is that the kinetic energy starts to increase. As at 30 degrees Celsius or 30 to 50, 40 degrees Celsius, you already have them excited now, and they have to expand, but they are confined. So when this thing keeps heating up, they will look for any means to burst out. So that's what usually happens that leads to what now? Explosion. All right. So if um we said the maximum amount of liquefied petroleum gas pressure container should Okay, the maximum amount that liquefied petroleum gas containers should be filled with is 85% at 40 degrees Celsius. Why? You must have that tolerance. If you don't allow that tolerance, remember what this means is that we don't fill up our gas storage facilities to the maximum. We don't fill up our gas storage facility to the maximum. We don't do that. Why? Because we have to create room for expansion. You understand? If they don't have a space for expansion inside that vessel, so when you go to fill your cooking gas, for instance, don't expect that they will fill it to the brim. No. If they do that, they are putting you at risk. It's like a time bomb you are taking home. All right. So there must be what now? A space for expansion. For LNG, we fill up to 90 to 95%. But for LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, which is the type we use in our cooking gas, we fill it up to 85% and 40 degrees Celsius. Um, Usually it's even lesser when it's at higher temperature. This value is when we are looking at areas that have low temperature. So in areas like Nigeria, for instance, where you might even have to use lesser, because of our temperate region. All right. So that's about that. Then again, I mentioned something about um, the the bond walls, the design for bond walls for storing what do we call it, for our storage or tank farms, our storage tanks or tank farms. And I said that they must be designed at 110%. the volume of the tank. What does this mean? If this tank contains 100 metric ton, for instance, that also reminds me, added to your assignment, you are also going to be telling us the different types of storage tanks, and their advantages. Different types of storage tanks and their advantages. I'll be showing us our questions shortly. Okay. Now, the design for the storage tank bond wall. What you see around here is called a bond wall. Bond walls must be designed in such a way that they will take 110% of this first, of this vessel. All right. Why do we have to take 110 Why do we have to design it that way? Peradventure, there is a loss of containment. A loss of containment that will in could result in the total loss of the content, or the loss of the total content, the whole content of the tank. The confinement, which is the bond wall, should still be able to contain, that's like a secondary containment now, should still be able to contain all the content and still have an allowance, you understand, of about 10%. So what does this mean? If this tank is 70 or 100 million liters, for instance, if that's maybe 100 metric tons, or 100 billion, that's 100 metric ton. If it's about 100 metric ton that this thing contains, then this bond wall, this one for this tank alone, will be about 110 metric ton. So that if there is a leakage or loss of containment or rupture or any form of loss of containment of this tank, everything will remain inside. Nothing will spill out. That's one of the ways we try to avoid spillages from any of these tanks, from our or within our tank storage facilities. So it is very important that we take note of that. All right. So now these tanks can also be isolated. Usually we have access. There are several types of tanks that we have. We have the floating roof, we have the conical roof kind of tanks, we have spherical tanks, and the rest of them. So your assignment is to tell me one of your assignments amongst what I'm going to show you shortly. So tell me the types of tanks that there is, and then they are okay. So this is your assignment. I combine assignment 1 and 2. I'm sorry, 2 and 3. I'm combining these assignments for us. So please take a snapshot. Sorry. Okay. You can take a snapshot of this, then I'll scroll up again. So you take the remaining snapshot. This is the first shot. Take this snapshot. But some people, there were some complaints of people not being able to uh, get the assignment, the previous assignment. So I've added assignment 2 and assignment 3. If you've taken a shot of this, then you take a shot of the remaining part too. Okay. Okay. And there are some study links there. Okay. So I would added to this assignment here is here K. Question K is list and explain the types of storage facility. List and explain the types of storage tanks. Oil and types of storage tanks, stating their okay. No, let's leave it down. List and explain the types of what storage tanks. So please ensure you carry out these assignments. You have some study links. You can also watch some videos on YouTube. Okay, on YouTube. So you can take a screenshot of that. If that has been taken, okay. So if that has been taken, ensure that you submit these assignments to engineerima.jpts@gmail.com using this as your subject. If you don't use this OGM 405 assignment 2 and 3 as the subject with your center name as the subject, then I might not be able to sort out your. This is what I mean by making it the subject. If you can see my screen, when you put compose, when you type when you want to send your mail, you type engineer Ima blah 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 on the subject on the title, then you put the subject as OGM 405 OGM 405 and then assignment dash assignment one blah blah blah, everything that you have to write. Then you can now write something on the body and attach your document. Failure to do that, your assignment might not be easily sorted out. Okay, so please take note of that. It is very important. Now, these are valves for this connection, and then we can also use them for isolation. Okay, very importantly, there are failures of tanks. Please study on tank failures and also on the Piper Alpha incident of 1988. The Piper Alpha incident of 1988. Piper, P-I-P-E-R, Alpha, A-L-P-H-A. The Piper Alpha incident of 1988. This is a typical example of an explosion of a tank. Okay, and then we will be looking at, okay, this already talks about what I was mentioning on the secondary, on the capacity of a tank. That it must be what now? 110%. Yeah, yeah, I'm already rounding up 110% of that, and also on bonding. All right, then filling up of tanks. So we'll be looking at the procedure for filling up of tanks in our next class, hopefully, and we'll just do a total review, starting with the maintenance planning. Thank you very much for your time. Please stay safe and ensure you practice your social distancing and personal hygiene. God bless you. All right. Okay. If I still have some time, thank you, Mr. Yomi. If I still have some time, I'll just discuss on the filling of tanks. When we're filling tanks, we need to be very careful